Today, we're diving into a book that's over 100 years old, but trust me, it still packs a serious punch. It's called The Kneeling Christian. It's this really challenging look at what its anonymous author believed was one of the most powerful, yet totally neglected forces available to us, prayer. So let's get into it. So the author kicks things off with this wild story. Picture this. You're a traveler in China, and you walk into a temple. You see worshipers writing their prayers down on little slips of paper, wrapping them up in wet mud, and literally flinging them at an idol. If the mud ball sticks, hey, your prayer gets answered. If it falls off, well, too bad. It sounds totally random, right? A complete game of chance? But that strange story is just a setup for this really provocative question. The author turns it right back on the reader and asks, is the way a lot of us pray really any different? Are we just kind of throwing our requests up at the ceiling, hoping something, anything will stick? This one question is what drives the entire book. To really get the argument, we're going to break it down into 4 key parts. First, we'll look at the spiritual crisis the author saw. Then, we'll get into the incredible promises that he believes are being ignored. After that, we'll explore what real prayer even is according to the book. And finally, we'll cover the conditions for unlocking all that power. Okay, so let's start with a problem. The author isn't just saying, hey, we could all probably pray a little bit more. No, the argument is way more intense. It's that the church is in a full-blown crisis, and it's all because of prayerlessness. The whole thing is built on this really startling idea from Scripture, the idea that God wondered that there was no one to intercede, no one to stand in the gap. And the author's logic is this. If God was wondering back then, just imagine how astonished he must be today at the lack of prayer among the very people who claim to follow him. And that leads to this series of diagnostic questions. Why is there so much defeat, so much discouragement, such a lack of spiritual power? And for every single one of these problems, the book gives the exact same, blunt diagnosis. Why are individual Christians so often defeated and discouraged in their lives? The answer: because they pray so little. Okay, what about the people doing the work? Why are church workers so disheartened? You guessed it, because they pray so low. And why do entire churches seem to lack that spiritual fire, that vitality? Well, the answer is always the same. It's a collective failure when it comes to what the author calls real prayer. It all comes down to this one single, powerful idea. Every other failure we see in our lives and our churches, it's all just a symptom of one root cause: our failure in secret prayer. All right, so after laying out that pretty serious crisis, the author pivots to the other side of the coin, the incredible untapped potential. And this isn't just some nice, fluffy idea. It's backed by some of the most jaw-dropping promises you can find in Scripture. The author points to this really fascinating detail. In a single conversation, Jesus repeats his promise about answered prayer 6 different times. 6! The argument is that that kind of repetition is meant to practically scream its importance at us. And here's just one of those promises. The author calls them almost incredible. And you can see why. The scope is just breathtaking. Whatsoever ye shall ask. His point is that Christians are basically sitting on a treasure chest of divine power, but most of us just walk right past it. So this all gets framed as a spiritual battle. The devil's #1 strategy isn't to stop people from working for God or being busy or running programs. In fact, he loves all that stuff. According to this book, the one thing, the only thing that truly makes Satan tremble is when a Christian actually gets on their knees and prays. This brings us to a really crucial turning point in the whole argument. If prayer is so incredibly powerful, then what exactly is it? Because the author is convinced that most of us have it all wrong. So he asks this fundamental question, and the way he answers it is what really separates his view from what you might call the common understanding. So the common view, right? Prayer is basically our spiritual shopping list. It's asking God for stuff. But the author's definition is totally different. He says it's not about getting things from God, it's about getting to God. It's the lifting up of the living soul to the living God. It's all about communion. And this, right here, is the ultimate payoff. The goal isn't just to get a better life or a healed body or a solved problem. The highest purpose, the greatest possible reward of prayer, is simply knowing God more deeply. It completely shifts the focus from transaction to relationship.
Okay, so if real prayer is this powerful communion with God, how do you actually do it effectively? Well, in this final section, the author gets really practical and lays out what he calls the conditions for accessing this power. The key phrase that keeps popping up in Scripture is "in my name." Now, the author argues this is not some magic formula you just tack on at the end of a prayer. To pray in his name means to pray as a true representative of Christ, to be in complete alignment with his character, with his will, and for his glory. So how do you get to that place of alignment? The author lays out these conditions, and you can see how they're all linked. It requires abiding in him, which is this deep, constant connection. It means you let his words soak into your thinking. It means you're actively obeying his commands, and it all stems from a pure heart that genuinely wants God's will more than its own. Now, to make this all feel a bit more real, the book gives this incredible case study, the story of a missionary named John Hyde. He actually became known simply as Praying Hyde, the ultimate example of someone who actually lived out these conditions. And Hyde's journey wasn't some automatic thing. It all started when a friend sent him a letter that basically challenged his spiritual life, and it made him angry. He spent days wrestling with his own pride. But the turning point came with total surrender, when he finally asked God to deliver him from his own sin. And it was only after that that he became this man of incredible spiritual power, whose prayers were known to have these dramatic, tangible results. So, after all of it, the crisis, the promises, the conditions, we're left with this final radical question. What if prayer isn't just the preparation for the real work or the support for the work? What if prayer is the greatest work we can possibly do? It's a really provocative idea from this classic text to wrestle with,